It was a quiet evening in the small town of Richmond, Kentucky. The kind of evening where the sky turned orange and pink, and the air smelled like fresh grass and someone's backyard barbecue. In a little white house at the end of Maple Street, a family was trying to pretend that everything was normal, but nothing about that night was normal at all. David had been packing his bags since morning. His military uniform hung on the bedroom door, pressed and ready. His boots sat by the front entrance, polished until they almost shined like mirrors. Tomorrow, he would board a plane and fly halfway across the world. Tomorrow, he would leave behind everything he loved. His wife, Linda, stood in the kitchen doorway, watching him zip up his duffel bag. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not tonight. Not in front of their daughter. But her eyes were red, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She had married a soldier. She knew this day would come. But knowing something and living through it are two very different things. Their daughter, Lily, was only 3 years old. She sat on the living room carpet, playing with a set of wooden blocks. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't know that her father was going somewhere dangerous. She didn't know that some fathers who left for places like that never came back. All she knew was that Daddy had been acting strange all day. He kept hugging her for no reason. He kept looking at her like he was trying to memorize her face. David finished packing and walked into the living room. He stood there for a moment, just watching his little girl stack one block on top of another. Her tiny hands worked so carefully. Her brown hair fell across her forehead. She looked up at him and smiled. Something inside his chest broke into 1,000 pieces. He sat down on the floor next to her. The carpet was old and worn, but it was soft. This was the same spot where he used to lie down and let Lily climb on his back. The same spot where they would watch cartoons together on lazy Sunday mornings. He wondered if she would remember any of this when he was gone. "Lily," he said softly, "come here, sweetheart." She crawled into his lap without hesitation. She always did. To her, Daddy was the safest place in the world. He wrapped his arms around her and held her close. She smelled like baby shampoo and the strawberry yogurt she had eaten for dinner. "Daddy has to go away for a little while," he said. He tried to keep his voice steady. "But I'm going to come back. I promise." Lily looked up at him with big, curious eyes. "Where are you going?" "Far away. But not forever. Can I come?" He smiled, even though it hurt. "Not this time, baby. But you're going to stay here with Mommy? And when I come back, we're going to have the biggest party you've ever seen." Lily thought about this for a moment. Then she nodded, as if this was a perfectly reasonable deal. David looked over at the corner of the room, where his old guitar was leaning against the wall. It was a simple acoustic guitar, nothing fancy. The wood was scratched, and one of the tuning pegs was a little loose. But that guitar meant everything to him. His own father had given it to him when he was 12 years old. It was the first instrument he ever learned to play, and now it was the one thing he wanted to leave behind. He reached over and picked it up. The weight of it felt familiar in his hands. He hadn't played in weeks. There had been too much to do, too many forms to sign, too many things to pack. But tonight, he needed to play. He needed to give his daughter something to remember him by. He positioned the guitar on his knee and strummed a few chords. The sound filled the room, warm and gentle. Lily's eyes went wide. She had seen Daddy play before, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, it felt important. "I'm going to teach you a song," David said. "It's a very special song. My daddy taught it to me when I was a little boy, and now I'm going to teach it to you." Linda walked into the room and sat down on the couch. She had a small camcorder in her hand, one of those old models that recorded onto little tapes. She pressed the record button without saying a word. She didn't know why, but something told her that this moment needed to be saved. David began to play. The melody was slow and sweet, like a lullaby. It rose and fell like waves on a quiet beach. He called it Sunrise after the storm. It was a song about hope, about waiting for the light to come after the darkest nights. His father used to play it for him whenever he was scared or sad, and now he was passing it on. Lily listened with her whole body. Her little hands rested on the guitar, feeling the vibrations of each note. Her eyes never left her father's face. She didn't understand the words yet, but she understood the feeling. She understood that this was something special. When the song ended, David set the guitar aside and took Lily's hands in his. They were so small, so soft. He guided her fingers to the strings and helped her press down on the right spots. Together, they played the first 3 notes of the melody. "You hear that?" He said. "That's the beginning. That's where the story starts." Lily giggled. "I did it." "You did. And I want you to practice, okay? I want you to learn this whole song. And when I come home, you're going to play it for me. That's our deal." Lily nodded seriously, like she was accepting an important mission. "Okay, Daddy. I promise." David kissed the top of her head. "That's my girl." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep in her bed, David sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet. Linda had gone to bed early, unable to stay awake without crying. He picked up the guitar again and played the song one more time, just for himself. He thought about all the things he might miss. Lily's first day of school, her birthdays. The moment she learned to ride a bike, he thought about the possibility that he might not come back at all. Soldiers didn't talk about that out loud, but they all thought about it. He made a silent promise to himself that night. No matter what happened, he would find his way home. He would walk through fire if he had to. He would cross oceans. He would survive. Because somewhere in this little house in Kentucky, a 3-year-old girl was counting on him. The next morning came too fast. The sun rose like it always did, completely unaware of the pain it was bringing. David put on his uniform. He laced up his boots. He hugged Linda so tight that neither of them could breathe, and then he knelt down in front of Lily, who was still rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Remember our deal?" he said. She nodded. "The song. That's right. You practice every day, and when I come back, I want to hear the whole thing." Lily wrapped her little arms around his neck. "I love you, Daddy. Love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know." He stood up, grabbed his bag, and walked out the front door. He didn't look back. He couldn't. If he looked back, he knew he would never be able to leave. The military truck was waiting at the end of the driveway. David climbed in, and the door slammed shut behind him. Through the small window, he watched his house grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. He had no idea that it would be 10 long years before he saw it again. The first few months were the hardest. Linda would wake up in the middle of the night and reach for the empty side of the bed. She would make coffee for 2 people out of habit, then stand in the kitchen staring at the extra cup. The house felt too big and too quiet without David in it. But she kept going. She had to. Lily needed her. Every morning, Linda would get Lily dressed and fed. She would drive her to daycare, kiss her goodbye, and then go to work at the local grocery store. Every evening, she would pick Lily up, cook dinner, and try to make things feel as normal as possible. She smiled even when she didn't feel like smiling. She laughed at Lily's little jokes, even when her heart was breaking. Lily asked about her father constantly. "Where is Daddy? When is he coming home? Can we call him?" Linda had rehearsed her answers 100 times. "Daddy is working far away. He'll come home when his job is finished. We can't call him, but he's thinking about us every single day." At night before bed, Lily would ask to watch the video. It became their ritual. Linda would pull out the old camcorder, connect it to the television, and press play. And there he was. David, sitting on the living room floor with Lily in his lap, teaching her the first notes of that beautiful song. His voice filled the room. His smile lit up the screen. For those few minutes, it almost felt like he was still there. Lily would press her small hand against the television, trying to touch him. "Daddy," she would whisper, and Linda would hold back her tears until Lily fell asleep. 6 months passed, then 7. Linda had been counting the days, waiting for any news. David's letters had stopped coming after the 3rd month, but she told herself it was because of where he was stationed. Mail was probably slow. Communication was probably difficult. She refused to think about the other possibilities. Then one afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Linda opened it and found 2 soldiers standing on her porch. They were dressed in formal uniforms. Their faces were serious. She knew before they even spoke. that something terrible had happened. They told her that David's unit had gone missing during a mission. There had been no contact for weeks. The military was conducting a search, but the situation was complicated. They couldn't tell her much more than that. They used words like missing in action and ongoing investigation. They handed her a piece of paper with phone numbers to call if she had questions. She didn't remember closing the door. She didn't remember sitting down on the floor. She only remembered the way the world seemed to tilt sideways, like she was falling and couldn't stop. That night, she didn't show Lily the video. She couldn't. She sat on the edge of her bed and cried until there were no tears left. She cried for David. She cried for herself. And she cried for the little girl sleeping in the next room who had no idea that her father might never come home. But when the sun rose the next morning, Linda made a decision. She would not tell Lily the truth. Not yet, maybe not ever. Lily was too young to understand. Too young to carry that kind of pain. And besides, the military hadn't confirmed anything. David was missing, not gone. There was still hope. There had to be. So Linda kept the secret. She kept playing the video every night. She kept telling Lily that Daddy was working far away. She kept smiling, even when it felt like her heart was made of broken glass. Months turned into years. Lily started kindergarten. She made friends. She learned to read and write. She brought home drawings from school, pictures of their family with 3 stick figures holding hands. Daddy was always in the pictures, standing next to Mommy and Lily with a big smile on his face. Linda hung every single one on the refrigerator as Lily grew older. She started asking harder questions. Why doesn't Daddy ever call? Why can't we visit him? Don't they have phones where he works? Linda had to become a better liar. She said Daddy was in a place where phones didn't work. She said he was doing something very important in secret, so he couldn't talk to anyone. She said he loved them more than anything and thought about them every single day. Lily believed her. Children want to believe their parents. They need to believe that the world makes sense, that fathers come home, that promises are kept. On Lily's 5th birthday, Linda gave her a special present. It was David's old guitar, the one he had used to teach her the song. Lily's eyes went wide when she saw it. She ran her fingers over the scratched wood and the worn strings. It was too big for her small body, but she didn't care. She held it like it was the most precious thing in the world. This was Daddy's, Linda said. He wanted you to have it. From that day on, Lily practiced every single day. She would sit on the living room floor in the exact same spot where David had sat with her and try to play the song. Her fingers were too short at first. The chords were too hard. But she kept trying. She watched the video over and over again, studying her father's hands. She paused it, rewound it, played it back in slow motion. She memorized the way his fingers moved, the way he tilted his head when he played, the exact rhythm of the melody. It was like he was still teaching her. Even though he wasn't there, by the time she was 7, she could play the first half of the song. By the time she was 8, she could play the whole thing, though she made mistakes sometimes. By the time she was 10, she could play it perfectly. Every note, every pause, every gentle rise and fall of the melody. She played it every night before bed. It became her way of talking to her father. She would close her eyes and imagine that he could hear her wherever he was. She would imagine him smiling, nodding his head, saying, "That's my girl." Sometimes, late at night, Linda would stand outside Lily's bedroom door and listen. The sound of that song made her want to fall apart, but it also gave her strength. It reminded her that David was still with them in some way. His love was in that music. His promise was in those notes. Lily was 13 years old when everything changed. It was a cold morning in February, the kind of morning where the sky was gray and the wind cut through your jacket like a knife. Linda was in the kitchen making breakfast when the phone rang. She almost didn't answer it. She was tired. She had worked late the night before and hadn't slept well. But something made her pick up the phone. Something told her that this call was different. The voice on the other end was calm and official. It was a man from the military. He said his name, but Linda didn't hear it. She only heard the words that came next. David was alive. He had been held as a prisoner for almost 10 years. He had been rescued during a special operation just days ago. He was injured and weak, but he was alive. He was coming home. Linda dropped the phone. Her legs gave out beneath her, and she sank to the kitchen floor. She sat there for what felt like hours, her hands shaking, her mind trying to understand what she had just heard. David was alive. After all these years, after all, the nights of crying herself to sleep, after all the lies she had told to protect her daughter, he was alive. She picked up the phone and heard the man still talking, asking if she was okay. She couldn't speak. She just held the phone against her chest and sobbed. That evening, she sat Lily down at the kitchen table. Lily knew something was wrong. She could see it in her mother's face. "What happened?" Lily asked. Her voice was calm, but her hands were gripping the edge of the table. Linda took a deep breath. She had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times, but she never thought she would actually have it. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an old photograph of David. It was worn at the edges, faded from years of being held and looked at. "I need to tell you the truth," Linda said. "About your father? For the first time in 10 years? She told her daughter everything. Lily sat at the kitchen table and listened to every word her mother said. She didn't interrupt. She didn't ask questions. She just sat there, perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the old photograph of her father. Linda told her everything. She told her about the soldiers who came to the door. She told her about the words missing in action and what they meant. She told her about the years of not knowing, the years of hoping, the years of lying to protect her. She told her about the phone call that morning, about the rescue mission, about the miracle that none of them had dared to believe in. When Linda finished talking, the kitchen was completely silent. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Outside, a car drove past, but inside that small house, time seemed to stand still. Lily looked up at her mother. Her face was impossible to read. She was 13 years old now, not a little girl anymore. She had learned to hide her feelings, to keep things inside. But behind her calm expression, a storm was building. "You lied to me," she said quietly. For 10 years, Linda's heart shattered. She had known this moment would come. She had prepared herself for anger, for tears, for screaming. But Lily's voice was so calm, so controlled, that it was almost worse. "I was trying to protect you," Linda whispered. "You were so young. I didn't want you to grow up with that kind of pain." But he was alive. Lily's voice cracked just a little. "All this time, he was alive. And I thought he just forgot about us. I thought maybe he didn't want to come back." Linda reached across the table and grabbed her daughter's hands. "No, no, sweetheart. He never forgot. He was fighting to get back to us. Every single day he was fighting." Lily pulled her hands away. She stood up from the table and walked out of the kitchen without saying another word. Linda heard her footsteps going up the stairs. She heard the bedroom door close. And then she heard something that broke her heart all over again. She heard Lily crying. Linda wanted to go upstairs and hold her daughter. She wanted to explain, to apologize, to make everything okay. But she knew that Lily needed time. She needed space to feel everything she was feeling. So Linda stayed in the kitchen, staring at the photograph of her husband, and cried right along with her. Hours passed. The sun went down. The house grew dark and cold. Linda didn't turn on any lights. She just sat there, waiting. Finally, around 9 o'clock, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her hair was messy. But she was holding something in her arms. It was her father's guitar. She walked over to the table, sat down across from her mother. She placed the guitar in her lap and ran her fingers across the strings. The sound was soft and familiar. "I'm not mad at you," Lily said. Her voice was hoarse from crying. "I understand why you did it. I need time to think." Linda nodded. "Take all the time you need." Lily looked down at the guitar. "He's really coming home." "Yes, in a few weeks. They said he needs medical care first. But then he's coming home." Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that Linda would never forget. I kept my promise. I learned the song. I've been practicing for 10 years, just like he asked me to. Linda's tears started falling again. I know, baby. I've heard you play it 1,000 times. Do you think he'll remember? Do you think he'll remember teaching it to me? Linda smiled through her tears. I think that's probably the only thing that kept him going. The next few weeks were the longest of their lives. Linda spent every day preparing the house. She cleaned rooms that hadn't been touched in years. She bought new sheets for the bed. She filled the refrigerator with all of David's favorite foods, the ones she remembered him loving before he left. Lily helped, but her mind was somewhere else. She was thinking about the father she barely remembered. She had watched that old video so many times that she knew every detail of his face. But videos weren't the same as real life. She didn't know what his voice sounded like when he wasn't being recorded. She didn't know how he smelled, or how his arms felt when he hugged her. She had been 3 years old when he left. All she had were fragments, pieces of memory that didn't quite fit together. She was scared. She didn't tell anyone, but she was terrified. What if he didn't recognize her? What if he looked at her and saw a stranger? What if 10 years had changed him so much that he wasn't the same person anymore? She dealt with her fear the only way she knew how. She practiced the song. Every night she sat in her room and played Sunrise After the Storm over and over again. She played it until her fingers hurt. She played it until she could do it with her eyes closed. She played it until the song became a part of her. As natural as breathing, one night, about a week before David was scheduled to come home, Linda knocked on Lily's door. Can I come in? Lily set down the guitar. Yeah. Linda walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked around the room at all the posters on the walls, the books on the shelves, the clothes scattered on the floor. Her little girl had grown up so much. I want to show you something, Linda said. She was holding the old camcorder. Lily's eyes widened. Is there more? More videos? Linda nodded. I found this one a few days ago. I forgot I had even recorded it. She pressed play and handed the camera to Lily. On the small screen, David appeared. He was sitting alone in the living room. It was nighttime. The lamp behind him cast a warm glow on his face. He looked tired, but he was smiling. Hey, Lily, he said, looking straight at the camera. You're asleep right now. It's the night before I leave, and I can't sleep. So I'm making this video for you. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen this before. I don't know how long I'll be gone, David continued. I hope it's not too long. But if something happens, if I don't come back for a while, I want you to know something. Leaned closer to the camera. His eyes were wet. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Being your dad is the greatest gift I've ever received. And no matter where I am, no matter how far away, I'm always going to be thinking about you. I'm always going to be proud of you. And I'm always going to love you. He paused and wiped his eyes. Learn the song, okay? Practice every day. And when I come home, you play it for me. That's our deal. And I never break my deals. The video ended. The screen went black. Lily sat there, holding the camera, tears streaming down her face. She had waited 10 years to hear those words. 10 years of wondering if her father remembered her, if he still cared, if she was still important to him. Now she knew. She looked up at her mother. I'm ready, she said. I'm ready for him to come home. Linda pulled her into a tight hug. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. 3 days later, they got the call. David's plane would land at Fort Campbell on Saturday morning. After 10 years of waiting, 10 years of hoping, 10 years of practicing that same beautiful song, the moment had finally arrived. Their family was about to be whole again. Saturday morning arrived like any other day. The sun came up. Birds sang outside the window. But for Linda and Lily, this was not just any day. This was the day they had been waiting for since that cold February phone call. This was the day David was finally coming home. Linda woke up at 4 in the morning. She couldn't sleep anyway. She had been lying in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what she would say when she saw him. Would she run into his arms? Would she cry? Would she even recognize him after all these years? She got dressed slowly, carefully choosing what to wear. She picked a blue dress that David had always liked. It was old and a little faded, but it still fit. She put on the necklace he had given her on their wedding day. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman who had aged 10 years in what felt like 10 lifetimes. Down the hall, Lily was already awake. She had barely slept either. She sat on the edge of her bed, fully dressed, her father's guitar case leaning against the wall beside her. She had made a decision sometime during the night. She was going to bring the guitar to the airport. She didn't know if she would play the song there, but she wanted it with her. It made her feel closer to him. They left the house at 5:30. The drive to Fort Campbell took about 2 hours. Linda drove in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight that her knuckles turned white. Lily sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the dark highway stretching ahead of them. Neither of them knew what to say. There were no words for a moment like this. As they got closer to the base, Lily started to feel sick. Her stomach was in knots. Her heart was beating so fast, she could hear it in her ears. She had dreamed about this day for so long, but now that it was actually happening, she felt terrified. What if he doesn't like who I've become? What if I disappoint him? What if we have nothing to say to each other? She pushed the thoughts away and focused on the road. They arrived at Fort Campbell just before 8 o'clock. The sky was gray and overcast. A cold wind blew across the tarmac. There were other families there too, waiting for their loved ones. Some held signs. Some held flowers. Some just stood there, shaking and crying before the plane even landed. Linda and Lily found a spot near the front of the crowd. Linda reached over and took Lily's hand. It was the first time they had touched all morning. No matter what happens, Linda said quietly, we're going to get through this together. Okay? Lily nodded. She couldn't speak. Her throat was too tight. They waited. Minutes felt like hours. Lily kept looking at the empty runway, waiting for something to appear. Every time she heard a noise, her heart jumped. And then finally, she saw it. A large military plane coming in from the east, growing bigger and bigger as it approached. The crowd around them started to stir. People pointed. Some started crying. The plane landed with a loud roar. It taxied down the runway and came to a stop about 100 yards away. The engines powered down. Everything went quiet. Then the door opened. Soldiers began walking down the steps, one by one. Some of them looked strong and healthy. Others were on crutches. Others were in wheelchairs. The crowd surged forward, families rushing to meet their loved ones, crying and hugging and laughing all at once. Linda scanned every face, searching for the man she married, searching for the man she had loved for over 15 years. But she didn't see him. Where was he? Had something gone wrong? And then she saw him. He was one of the last to come off the plane. He walked slowly, carefully, like every step took effort. He was thinner than she remembered, so much thinner. His hair had turned almost completely gray. His face was lined with wrinkles that hadn't been there before. He looked like he had aged 30 years instead of 10. But his eyes were the same, dark brown and warm, filled with a kindness that no amount of suffering could erase. Linda let out a sound that was somewhere between a cry and a scream. She ran toward him, pushing through the crowd, not caring who she bumped into. She reached him and threw her arms around his neck, holding on like she would never let go. David held her back. His arms were weak, but his grip was tight. He buried his face in her hair and breathed her in. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. They just stood there, holding each other. While the world moved around them, after what felt like forever, Linda pulled back and looked at him. She touched his face, his hair, his shoulders, like she was making sure he was real. You came back, she whispered. You actually came back. David smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. I promised, didn't I? Then his eyes moved past Linda and he saw her. The teenage girl standing a few feet away, clutching a guitar case, tears streaming down her face, his daughter. David's breath caught in his chest. The last time he saw her, she was 3 years old. She fit in his arms. She called him Daddy and laughed when he tickled her. Now she was almost as tall as her mother. Her face had changed. Her hair was longer. She was a completely different person, but her eyes were the same as they had always been. He walked toward her slowly. He didn't want to scare her. He didn't want to overwhelm her. He stopped a few feet away and just looked at her, taking in every detail. "Lily," he said. His voice cracked when he said her name. She didn't respond. She just stood there, frozen, staring at this man who was her father, but also a stranger. 10 years of memories and dreams and fears crashed into each other inside her head. She didn't know what to feel. She didn't know what to do. David took another step forward. "It's okay," he said gently. "I know this is hard. I know I look different. I know everything is different, but I'm still me. I'm still your dad." Lily's lower lip trembled. A sob escaped her throat before she could stop it. And then, without thinking, she dropped the guitar case and ran into his arms. David caught her and held her tight. He was crying now, too. They both were. All those years of separation, all those years of waiting, all those years of wondering if this moment would ever come, poured out of them in that single embrace. "I missed you, Lily," cried into his shoulder. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, sweetheart. Every single day, every single second." They stood there for a long time, father and daughter, reunited at last. The drive home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. It wasn't tense or anxious. It was peaceful, tired, like they had all run a marathon and were finally catching their breath. David sat in the back seat, looking out the window at the passing scenery. Everything looked the same, but felt different. The roads he used to drive, the towns he used to know. It was like coming back to a place from a dream. Lily sat next to him, not touching, but close. She kept glancing at him out of the corner of her eye, still not quite believing he was real. When they pulled into the driveway of the little white house on Maple Street, David let out a long breath. He stared at the front door, the windows, the old oak tree in the front yard that had grown so much taller. "Home," he said quietly. "I'm actually home." They walked inside together. David moved slowly through the rooms, touching things, remembering. The couch where he used to sit with Lily, the kitchen where he and Linda used to dance while cooking dinner, the photographs on the wall showing a life that had continued without him. He stopped in front of one picture. It was Lily's school photo from a few years ago. She was smiling, missing one of her front teeth. He had missed that. He had missed all of it. Lily watched him from across the room. She could see the pain in his face, the regret, the sorrow of all the moments he would never get back. She made a decision. "Dad," she said. It was the first time she had called him that since the airport. "Sit down." David turned to look at her. She was standing in the middle of the living room, holding her guitar case. "Sit down," she said again. "There's something I need to show you." David looked at his daughter standing in the middle of the living room. She was holding the guitar case like it was the most important thing in the world. And in that moment, he suddenly understood. He remembered that night 10 years ago, when he sat on this very floor and taught her the first notes of a song. He remembered the way her tiny fingers felt under his hands. He remembered the promise they made to each other. "Learn the song. Play it when I come home." He had thought about that promise every single day for 10 years. In the darkest moments, when he wasn't sure if he would survive another night, he would close his eyes and imagine his little girl sitting with that old guitar, practicing the melody he taught her. That image kept him alive. That hope gave him the strength to keep going. And now, here she was. Not a little girl anymore, but a young woman, standing in front of him with his father's guitar, ready to keep her promise. David walked slowly to the old couch and sat down. The cushions sank beneath him, familiar and worn. He looked around the room and realized that almost nothing had changed. The same lamp in the corner, the same photographs on the shelf, the same faded carpet where they used to play together, but everything had changed. He had changed. Lily had changed. 10 years had passed, and they could never get that time back. Linda sat down next to him and took his hand. Her fingers were warm and soft. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She just held his hand and waited. Lily knelt down and unzipped the guitar case. She lifted the instrument carefully, like she was handling something sacred. She ran her fingers across the strings, checking the tuning. Then she sat down on the floor, in the exact spot where her father had sat all those years ago, and placed the guitar in her lap. She looked up at her parents. Her mother was crying quietly, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her father's eyes were fixed on her, wide and wet, like he was seeing something he couldn't quite believe. Lily took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. She had played this song 1,000 times, but this time was different. This time, her father was actually there to hear it. She closed her eyes and tried to calm herself. She thought about all the nights she had spent practicing in her room. All the time she had watched that old video, studying her father's fingers, memorizing every note. All the years she had waited for this moment, she opened her eyes and began to play. The first note rang out clear and pure. It filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Lily's fingers moved across the strings, slow and careful, drawing out the melody her father had taught her when she was barely old enough to walk. David recognized it immediately. Sunrise After the Storm, the song his own father had taught him when he was a boy. The song he had passed on to his daughter the night before he left for war. The song that had kept him company in the darkness for 10 long years. The melody rose and fell like waves on a calm ocean. It was gentle and sad, but also hopeful. It told a story without words. A story about waiting. About loss. About the light that comes after the longest night. David's hands began to shake. He tried to hold himself together, but he couldn't. The tears started falling before he could stop them. They rolled down his cheeks and dripped onto his shirt. He didn't wipe them away. He just sat there, listening, crying, watching his daughter play. Lily kept her eyes on the guitar. She didn't look up. She couldn't. If she saw her father's face, she knew she would break down. So she focused on the strings, on the notes, on the music that connected them across all those lost years. She played the verse that her father had taught her that night. Then she played the chorus, the part she had learned on her own by watching the video again and again. Then she played the bridge, the most difficult section, where the melody became complex and layered, rising towards something beautiful, and then she played the ending. The final notes hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. The room was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was like the whole world had stopped to listen. Lily set the guitar down gently and looked up at her father. David was a mess. His face was wet with tears. His shoulders were shaking. He looked broken and healed at the same time, like something inside him had shattered and put itself back together in a new way. He stood up from the couch, slowly, carefully. His legs were weak. His whole body was trembling, but he walked toward his daughter and knelt down in front of her. For a moment they just looked at each other, father and daughter, stranger and family, past and present. Then David opened his arms, and Lily fell into them. He held her tight, tighter than he had ever held anything in his life. She buried her face in his shoulder and cried. He stroked her hair and whispered into her ear. "You did it," he said. "You kept your promise. You learned the song?" "I practiced every day," Lily said through her tears. "Just like you asked me to." "I know. I knew you would. I never doubted you for a second." They stayed like that for a long time. Linda watched from the couch, crying and smiling at the same time. The three of them had been apart for so long, separated by oceans and wars and years of silence. But in that moment, holding each other in the middle of that small living room, they were finally together again. When they finally pulled apart, David looked at Lily with wonder in his eyes. "Play it again," he said. Lily laughed. It was a surprised, happy laugh. "Really? Please? I want to hear it again. I want to hear it 100 times. So she played it again, and this time, something magical happened. David reached over and placed his hand on the guitar, feeling the vibrations of the strings. He remembered how to play. His fingers found the chords on their own, as if the music had been waiting inside him all along. He started to hum along softly at first, then louder. Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide. "You remember?" "I never forgot," David said. "Not for a single day." They played together. Father and daughter, side by side, their fingers moving in harmony. The melody filled the house, spilling out through the windows and into the quiet street outside. It was the most beautiful sound any of them had ever heard. Linda pulled out her phone and started recording. She didn't know why. She just felt like this moment needed to be saved. Just like she had saved that first video 10 years ago, when the song ended. The three of them sat together on the floor, laughing and crying and holding each other. They talked for hours. David told them about the years he was gone, about the things he had endured, about the memories that had kept him alive. Lily told him about school, about her friends, about learning to play the guitar. Linda told him about the hard days and the good days, about raising their daughter alone, about never giving up hope. They talked until the sun went down and the room grew dark. They talked until their voices were hoarse and their eyes were heavy. They talked like they were trying to make up for 10 years of silence in a single night. Finally, round midnight, they fell asleep on the living room floor. David lay on the old carpet, Lily curled up next to him, Linda resting her head on his chest. The guitar lay beside them, silent now. Its work done, for the first time in 10 years. The Torres family slept under the same roof. The next morning, Linda posted the video of Lily playing the song online. She didn't expect much. She just wanted to share their story with a few friends and family members. But something unexpected happened. The video spread, first to dozens of people, then hundreds, then thousands. Within a week, it had been viewed over 10 million times. News stations picked it up. Websites wrote articles about it. People all over the world watched the teenage girl play that beautiful song for her father, and they cried right along with him. Messages poured in from everywhere. From soldiers who had been away from their families, from children who had lost parents, from people who understood what it meant to wait, to hope, to never give up. They wrote about how the video had touched them, how it had made them believe in love and family and the power of a simple promise. Lily was overwhelmed. She had never wanted to be famous. She had just wanted to play a song for her dad. But her story had touched something deep inside people, something that needed to be touched. A few weeks later, a television show invited them to share their story. They flew to New York and sat on a big stage in front of a live audience. The host asked David about his years as a prisoner, about the rescue, about coming home to a daughter he barely recognized. He answered honestly, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing. Then the host turned to Lily. "What made you keep practicing all those years?" she asked. "How did you stay committed to that promise for so long?" Lily thought about the question for a moment. The audience was silent, waiting. "I guess I never really believed he was gone," she said finally. "I know that sounds crazy, but every time I played that song, I felt like he could hear me, like he was out there somewhere listening. And I didn't want to let him down." The audience erupted in applause. David reached over and took his daughter's hand. "She never let me down," he said, his voice breaking. "Not once. She's the strongest person I know." After the show, they went back home to Kentucky. The fame faded, as fame always does. The interview requests stopped. The world moved on to the next viral video, the next heartwarming story. But for the Torres family, life had changed forever. David spent the next few months recovering. His body had been through so much, and it took time to heal. But every day, he got a little stronger. Every day he spent time with Linda and Lily, rebuilding the life they had lost. And every night, without fail, Lily would pick up the guitar and play that song. Sometimes David would join her. Sometimes he would just sit and listen. But every time, when the last note faded away, he would smile and say the same thing. "That's my girl." Years later, when Lily was grown and had children of her own, she taught them the song. She sat them down in her living room, just like her father had done with her, and helped their tiny fingers find the right strings. She told them the story of their grandfather, the soldier who came home after 10 years, and the promise that had kept their family together. "Never break your promises," she would tell them, "no matter how hard it gets, no matter how long it takes. A promise is a bridge between two hearts, and as long as that bridge is standing, nothing can keep you apart." The song lived on, passed from generation to generation, a melody about hope, about love, about the sunrise that always comes after the storm, and somewhere, watching from above, or maybe just from the old armchair in the corner, David Torres smiled. His little girl had kept her promise, and because she did, their story would never be forgotten.